Well, hello. It's good to see you again. Today, we're going to do another dry run of my upcoming podcast, which has been in the works for several months now, and I'm really excited to launch it. But we've got a few more things to do before we can fully announce the name of it and really get the ball rolling on it. So, we've got a new set that we're about to start building. I've got a few things I just want to do to make it look a little bit more visually appealing. So, today, we're just sort of doing more of a Patreon style video, but we're going to do it for the public because I feel like we all need a little bit of consolation because American Girl has just raised their prices on a lot of their dolls, and we all have a lot of feelings about it, including me. And I just kind of wanted to sit down and chat about it today to talk about why I think they're doing this to us and what I think it means for the brand. So grab something nice to drink and we can sit down and have a chat. So this is another pilot test episode of my new podcast, which I have named, but I'm not going to tell you the name yet. So anyway, let's get into it. So, bummer alert, American Girl has raised the prices on most of their named dolls, which most notably includes the Girl of the Year, all of the historical dolls for the most part, as well as their Disney line. So, yeah, we have a lot of feelings about it. I think most of us are not super happy about this, obviously, because I think a lot of us have complained about quality decreases over the years. So it's really frustrating, of course, to see prices going up on all of our favorite items. And, these are luxury goods for us. We don't need these things to survive. But in some cases, it kind of feels like we do because I know a lot of us are kind of diving into the doll world to escape from the nightmare that's going on around us in the real world. So, yeah, it sucks that we have to basically find another way to make $10. I feel like before this is over with, I feel like in 5 years we're gonna be like Jan Brady from the Brady Bunch movie. We're like, there's got to be a way to make $20,000 just to buy like a Truly Me doll. So yeah, we're not thrilled about it. But again, I have a few theories as to why we're seeing price increases. I mean, obviously the main one is that we're just seeing price increases everywhere. I know that inflation has gotten better in some cases. I don't feel like groceries are skyrocketing in the way that they were a couple of years ago, but we're not seeing prices come down on anything. And I also want to be careful not to make this just a huge slander video towards American Girl because obviously they're a company that I love very much, and I also understand that tough decisions have to be made at a corporate level to make sure that a company can thrive. And so, as a person sitting here that's a fan of the brand that's not involved with them whatsoever, I don't have insider information. I can only guess as to what's going on. And so I don't want to sit here and say like, oh, they should have done this, and this, and act like I can fix problems or make them a better company as someone who's sitting on the other side of the country just complaining about the price of dolls going up $10. So I guess I should at least give a little bit of a disclaimer for that, as I understand that I am just a guy and I'm not affiliated with a company, and there's probably a lot of information that I don't know that contributed to a lot of this, but I kind of want to dive into it and talk about a few things because I know, again, a lot of people are really mad about this price increase because American Girl, like I said, is a luxury brand. It's something that, again, we don't have to have, but it's a brand that is bringing a lot of us comfort. And, most of us have a set amount of money that we make every month. And now more money has to go towards our American Girl hobby. So it's like, where do we find this extra $10? So some people are just like, this isn't a big deal. Who cares? Prices are going up everywhere. And others are like, this is the worst thing ever. And so I'm kind of in the middle. Obviously, I think really I understand why the prices are getting higher because, first of all, American Girl's prices, I think over the years, like we're talking since 1986, I think they have done a really spectacular job of keeping prices down because, these dolls were under $100 in the 80s when they first launched the company, but that was very, very high for a doll at the time, especially a doll that was considered a playline doll. American Girl is obviously not like a Barbie quality doll, but it still wasn't a collector doll. It was a doll that was meant to be played with by children that were 6 to 12 years old. So It is a Playline doll, but again, in the 80s, like if you adjust for inflation, American Girl dolls, this is the point I was trying to get to, is if you adjust for inflation, based on the original price of the dolls in the 80s, they really should be closer to $200 per doll, just based on inflation. Again, we're talking like almost 40 years ago that this line was launched. And I think American Girl has done a really, really good job of trying to not have these prices get so astronomical, because even though, like, yeah, we've seen the house, like the price of housing go up like an insane amount since then, especially over the last couple of years. I think American Girl understands that they are a luxury brand and there are a lot of alternatives for parents that are buying toys for their children. You know, you can still get an Our Generation doll at Target for like, I think $25, which, you know, you really start to like look and be like, okay, is an American Girl doll really worth the extra $100? And for a lot of people, that's a debate, especially a parent that's just buying a toy to get their kid to shut up so that they like will be quiet during dinner and not like terrorize the entire restaurant. So I do think American Girl is probably understanding that if they get these dolls like over $200, they're going to have a really hard time selling those things in this economy to parents that have options for buying dolls, like 18-inch dolls of obviously not the same quality. I would say American Girl's quality is like by far better than like My Life As and Our Generation. But I do think as times get more difficult for parents, they are going to really say like, okay, is it worth spending this on a doll for my 6-year-old that's probably just going to rip half her hair out and draw on her face with marker, and then we're going to be like, why did we do this? So I think American Girl knows that. They know that the higher the prices on these go, the more likely a parent is to make a decision to buy from a different doll brand. And I think that they've kept that in mind over the years, and that's why we haven't seen huge increases on these dolls. You know, it's been like $5 or $10 here and there, and I just think it's sort of starting to catch up with them, if I had to guess, especially considering that they've made a lot of really big moves this year. I mean, they moved a lot of their operations over to California, because American Girl was primarily operating out of Wisconsin still. That's where they've been operating since the beginning, and they really made a really big move this year to move, I think it was a lot of like administration work, like admin work, over to their Mattel headquarters in California. And that would have had a huge cost associated with it just to relocate employees. Again, I don't have insider information about that, but I would assume that there were probably a lot of incentives for people to pick up their lives and move from Wisconsin to California for the employees that moved. So there would have been, you know, again, we're talking probably something along the lines of bonuses, again, some sort of financial incentive to get them up and over to California, in addition to putting them in temporary apartments. I mean, you can't just relocate somebody and have them in the perfect living situation right away. Most people that I know that have moved for work have had to live in short stay apartments, and those are expensive. You know, there's just a lot of expenses associated with moving employees, especially if you're moving a lot of them. Now, to my knowledge, they didn't move the warehouse as far as like the shipping goes. So I think that that would have been probably a disaster to try and do that. Again, I assume that they moved the portion of their business that was more admin work. So, you know, they probably didn't have a ton of physical space to kind of account for in this new location, but it is California. So it is kind of frustrating to me when I see companies just feeling like they absolutely have to operate out of the biggest cities that they can find. I mean, obviously you can run a multi $100 million brand out of a like small town in Wisconsin instead of LA, but you know, Mattel is insisting that they basically run these lines out of one of the most expensive cities to live in the world, and certainly the country. So that is a little bit frustrating to me, that I do feel like there are a lot of like there's just a lot of unnecessary corporate spending that doesn't need to happen. And again, I think it's because a lot of people just feel entitled to live in big cities, and you know, it is their choice to make. If they want to run their company out of California, they're allowed to do so, but it does come with increased costs. And guess who foots the bill for that? Yeah, it's the customer. So when we're seeing cost increases like that, I do blame partly, you know, them moving their operations, or part of them anyway, to California, even though I know that part of it that they would save some money in some instances. Obviously, I would assume that there's probably a lot of travel happening as well for some of the employees that were living in Wisconsin. I bet there was a lot of travel between California and Wisconsin. That's probably part of the reason that they made that decision. But again, I just feel like Mattel should just move to Wisconsin. Like, hello, like it's crazy to me that companies spend so much money on real estate, and it really, at the end of the day, I don't feel like personally affects the quality of their work, especially the way the world is set up now. I get that, like, if you're in fashion design, like, Vivian Westwood isn't going to be based out of Wisconsin, but it's a doll company. It's like they're not doing New York Fashion Week or LA Fashion Week. So yeah, I do feel like it's kind of annoying that they're operating out of a big city. I feel like the dolls, all those products could cost less if they could operate out of a place that's cheaper. Another thing that I think is, this is going to come back to like personal ethics, but, I think another thing that really irritates me and a lot of people is that Mattel is a publicly traded company. So they have shareholders that have stakes in their stock. So basically, Mattel is under pressure to have increased profits, not only year over year, but every quarter. They want to see the profits of the company go up so that shareholders are watching the value of their stocks rise. And without getting into a whole spiel on the stock market and all of that, that ultimately boils down to the shareholders of a company are basically the ringleaders. And they're, even though, shareholders aren't always making decisions about how a company is operating, a company is going to make decisions based on having their stock prices go up because it makes the shareholders happy and it keeps the value of their company really high. So that's when you see things like decreased quality and increased price on dolls, because that increases profit. And it's so crazy to me. Again, this is like, to me, like capitalism dystopia, but it's so annoying to me and frustrating to see a company like Mattel, which I actually should have probably looked up their annual revenue, but it's in the billions. And, to see a company that is profiting hundreds of millions of dollars a year and it's still not enough. It's just crazy to me. Like, and again, it's a huge problem with public companies that the profit has to go up. And that is really, I think, probably the single biggest issue with all of this, that we're having to see year over year profits increase. And that's why we're seeing the quality decrease. It's totally fine. Like, no, it's not the end of the world if a company is profiting, let's just say $500 million a year. I don't actually know the numbers, but think about how incredible it is to have a company that has a $500 million a year profit. People have health, like all their employees have health insurance, good salaries, are living in a decent place. Like, everything is good. But in the minds of, again, I'm trying not to sound like one of those like uneducated teenagers that's like down with capitalism. I understand that the world is complicated, but the point I'm getting at is it just really sucks that a company making hundreds of millions of dollars is not enough, that it has to keep growing and keep growing and keep growing. And like I said, that's why we are seeing price increases and quality decreases, because that, at the end of the day, is what is dictating the profit margin for these companies, so that they can boast, quarterly increases and year over year increases in profits. That makes shareholders happy. But at the end of the day, it comes at the expense of upsetting customers. And, they're the people that are actually buying this product and building the brand up are ultimately unhappy with how things are going in terms of quality decreases and price increases. Like I was getting at before, it is okay to make $500 million one year and then $400 million the next year. We're talking profit again after employees have been paid and all the bills are paid. If you make $100 million less than the previous year, but you still made $300 million as a company, it's just crazy to me that that is a huge failure in a lot of people's eyes in corporate America. And again, I just feel like that's a huge problem. And this is not a Mattel only problem, obviously. Like, I think it's been on Patreon, but I've complained a lot about Etsy being a public company and how that has basically completely driven that platform into the ground. Etsy is garbage now, and it used to be a really amazing platform for sellers that made handmade things. It was just such an amazing community and sales platform, and now it's absolute garbage. The junkification of Etsy is real, and I blame that on a terrible CEO and a lot of poor decisions made in the interest of shareholders needing to see year over year profits. So yeah, we live in a capitalist dystopia, and I feel like that's a big part of what's going on here. But I don't want to make today's video all about that. Just again, me sitting here ranting about capitalism. But at the end of the day, that's really what I feel like the biggest problem is. So as far as the price increases go, it is a $10 price increase for most of the name dolls. So like the Disney Princess dolls are now $135 instead of $125. The historical dolls are now $125 instead of $115. And then the special edition historicals, like the dolls that we just saw get released a few weeks ago, are now $160 instead of $150. And just a quick side note, Truly Me is still $115 like it has been for like 10 years. And the Create Your Own dolls are still $220, which really, when you factor in the rewards, they're technically $210 because you basically get a $10 reward when you buy them. But the Create Your Own dolls have had a couple of price increases in recent years. I think they used to be about $200 and now they're $220. So luckily they haven't increased those, because that's sort of my like current obsession is the Create Your Own line. So I feel like I dodged a bullet a little bit with this price increase, because that's mostly what I'm buying and interested in now is the Create Your Own line. So for now I'm safe. Like I was saying before, I do think American Girl has done a really good job combating, is that how you say that word? Inflation, because we should see prices closer to $200 per doll. But that said, it has come at the price of quality. I mean, if you compare the Girl of Today line, which is basically the first iteration of what is now the Truly Me line, if you look at the outfits that came with the dolls, what we call the meat outfit that came with the dolls in 1995, it has like an insane amount of quality. Actually, I have one right here that I'll grab. This is my gorgeous Truly. I don't know why I keep calling her Truly Me. This is obviously a sign that I am so into modern American Girl lately that I'm starting to call American Girl of Today Truly Me. But this is my American Girl of Today number 18. This is the first version of her without the bangs, which is one of the rarest American Girl dolls. But you can see the outfit that like originally came with these dolls. We have like a denim vest, a white button-up Oxford shirt, a very high quality rib knit magenta t-shirt underneath that. We have the leggings, again, and really thick quality rib knit fabric. And again, we have shoes. So, oh, and a scrunchie as well. So like many pieces came on these dolls when they were originally released. And now we basically get what's essentially like a long t-shirt and a pair of shoes without socks. So we have definitely seen over the years, I think especially since COVID, we are starting to see a vast decrease in quality, particularly with like the meat outfits on the Truly Me dolls. And I think that's been the only way that they've been able to keep the prices down, because you have to realize they're not like, I get that a lot of people feel like it is purely corporate greed that's the cause for all this, but there are other factors. American Girl doesn't own their factory, to my knowledge. These dolls are made in China, and I'm pretty sure that it's a third-party factory that they're just very closely involved with. But as prices go up for their materials, because a doll is made of raw materials, obviously. Like the cost of vinyl has probably gone up. The cost of fabric has probably gone up. All of those things increase. And if the cost of labor goes up, then the price of your doll is going to skyrocket, because that affects like every hour that's put into these dolls manufacturing. And on top of that, obviously, as the price of fuel goes up, it makes getting them shipped from China all the way over to Wisconsin makes that incredibly expensive. And actually, that's one interesting tidbit about it being in Wisconsin. Like, because they're not on the coast, they have to bring all of those dolls over to probably somewhere on the East Coast and then have them trucked all the way out to Wisconsin. So a lot of things go into the making of a doll. And if things just increase a little bit on every single element that it takes to create that doll, that's going to make prices go up. And we know it's been out of control over the last several years, and it's why groceries cost a fortune now. So I get why we are seeing a decrease in quality on especially like the Truly Me line, because they're trying not to raise the price on it. It's the cheapest doll in their line. And they also, again, I do think the margins are probably pretty good on them, because they're able able to sell them on Amazon as well as like do huge sales on them. I've been able to purchase, newer Truly Me dolls for like $85 when they're having sales, and they have rewards that they offer to people. Like these dolls probably, again, I don't want to make a firm guess on what they cost to make, but I would venture to say it probably cost them about $30 to $40 to make these dolls if I had to guess. Again, that's including all the materials, labor, and like having them shipped over from China. So I do feel like they have a decent amount of margin in them still. And one thing that's been a notable characteristic of American Girl over the years is they, for the most part, do not wholesale their product. And it's changed a little bit over the years. We've seen them have their products sold in Costco, most notably. And again, Amazon, even though that's not really a wholesale marketplace, they're still taking a decent hit on the price of the doll by selling on Amazon. Amazon takes a pretty big cut of their profit when they make a sale there. But I've always said that I don't think that American Girl was as profitable as it could be all of these years. And I do think, again, I know that it wasn't unprofitable, but I think when you hear like, oh, wow, Pleasant Company did $1 million in sales in their first 4 months in business, I would venture to say they probably lost money. Like they probably didn't profit anything in that first year, even though, most companies don't, at that age. That's not unique in that sense. But, I think people hear these big numbers and don't understand the amount of cost that goes into things. But the way these dolls were made was really expensive from the beginning. And that's why I feel like they never tried to wholesale them, because I don't think that they could afford to. I just think that it was costing Pleasant Rowland a lot of money to make these dolls. And instead of basically being able to sell them in other stores, which if you're not familiar with how retail works, essentially most things that you buy in a store that are sold by a company that didn't make them, they typically pay about half of what they're charging you. So say for instance, like a doll, again, the margins will be different, especially if it's like big box stores. It can be a little bit different, but as a general rule, especially like with boutique sales, like if you own a small doll shop, typically if you're selling a doll for $80 in your shop, you probably paid about $40 for her plus shipping. So that's like a very rough, crude description of how retail works. But I just don't think American Girl has been able to get their profits up enough that they can really afford to mass produce these in a way. Now, recently, I guess maybe because they've made a lot of cuts when they went to China, I think that severely decreased the cost to make these things when they moved production to China in the late 90s. But traditionally, I feel like they have probably had trouble getting their cost down enough to cut the price in half so that they could sell them, for like wholesale, basically. So for instance, for them to sell to another store, for instance, let's just take like a small doll boutique as an example. So small doll boutique, if they need to sell the American Girl doll for $100, American Girl would need to sell that to them for $50. And if you do it based on what's called keystone pricing in the industry, essentially American Girl would need to have their manufacturing cost be $25 or less per doll. And I don't think that they're able to get their dolls, like, based on the quality and the make of them, they're still high quality dolls. I just don't think that they are able to get these dolls cheap enough to sell wholesale. This ended up being like a really huge rant on like the wholesale pricing structure, but it's all to say that I think that they have made a lot of decisions over the years to try and keep the retail prices of the dolls down. And I think one of the big decisions they made based on that was not doing wholesale and mainly relying on catalog and online sales to drive like most of the sales for the company. Again, you got to remember they haven't done a price increase on the Truly Me line in about 10 years. I think in 2014 the price of these dolls was $110. And I do think that is pretty remarkable. But again, we have seen some, of what they call shrinkflation, which basically means that instead of increasing the price on the product, they decrease the cost of what it costs to make. So they can still make the same amount of money per sale without having to increase the price of it. Also, I do think the timing of this is pretty odd. And I kind of feel like maybe they weren't planning to do this price increase. If I had to guess, maybe they kind of realized after this big corporate move that they did that a lot of their costs were maybe higher than they anticipated, possibly. But it's very strange to me that it was just basically a few weeks ago that they did this big historical re-release with Kirsten, Addie, and Josefina. And now 3 weeks later, they're increasing the price by $10. Like, That seems very odd to me. I feel like if the prices were going to be at $10, they would not have gone through all, like, again, think about all of the effort it takes, 3 weeks after launching a product to change all of the price tags in stores. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into changing the price on a product. So the fact that they launched those products, again, I think it was like 3 weeks ago that they relaunched those products for $150. The fact that only 3 weeks later that we're getting the price increase tells me that this was probably kind of a last minute decision. And that's why I feel like the timing on this is kind of odd. And especially, I think that there are a lot of people that are going to that event, and I think it's tomorrow. There's this big, like, exclusive Barry members only in-store shopping event where apparently they've got a bunch of new releases that they're announcing tomorrow. And side note, I didn't get an invite to this. I'm a Barry member and I didn't get an invite. I live like 2 hours from an American Girl store. What is up with that American Girl? Do y'all hate me? I don't get it. I love y'all, and sometimes I feel like y'all hate me. But anyway, so I think the timing on that is super odd. Like, they sold tickets to that event. Like, you had to, like, be a Barry member, which means spending a lot of money at American Girl, and then on top of that, buy a ticket, which I forgot what the price of the ticket was. But so people, I think, were probably waiting to buy some things on Sunday when they were going to make a trek out to the American Girl store for this shopping event. I bet you there were a lot of people that bought tickets to this event and said, you know what, I'll probably wait to pick up Julie or Kirsten or whomever. They were probably just waiting to pick them up at the event and get the doll in store. And now that doll is $10 more expensive than it was when they booked that ticket. I think that's a little bit mean. Like, I don't know. It would be nice if they would honor the original price for people who bought that ticket before the price increase. They won't, but again, that seems a little bit cruel to do that, in my personal opinion. And on top of that, they made that announcement yesterday, which was basically payday for a lot of people. So, most people save up for their doll collections, and payday comes and they're like, ooh, it's time for my new American Girl doll. And they did it like literally the day, like they increased the price the day like people were ready to buy their new dolls. So I think the timing really is very unfortunate on this. But like I said, I feel like it was kind of a last minute thing based on just the historical re-release alone going up $10 just 3 weeks after they launched it. So I think that's super odd. Maybe as time goes on, we'll kind of get some insight as to why that happened. But again, I just kind of think this price increase was last minute, if you ask me. We are coming up on the end of the second quarter for 2024. So, maybe sales are down and they're like, we really have to get the price of this stuff up. And they are probably banking on the fact that people won't really hesitate to buy a doll that's $10 more. Again, it's for most dolls, it's like roughly like a 9% price increase. So, I think they're probably thinking that it's not going to affect sales, and maybe it won't. I mean, personally, it's not going to affect whether or not I buy something. It's just going to like make me feel a little bit like, ugh, this is basically eating my rewards points. But eventually that goes away. And then we just, take for granted that dolls in the historical line cost $125 now. So yeah, the fact that we're coming up on the end of the second quarter for 2024 might be the reason for this price increase. They might have just looked at, the quarterly sales and said, this isn't enough. The shareholders are going to be mad and people are going to sell their stocks and we'll be ruined. So thank you, corporate America, for once again ruining things for us. I do remember seeing an Instagram comment that like on the official American Girl account, because naturally when stuff like this happens, people flood the comments of the company's most recent post to complain about it. And, it's fair. Companies need to hear people's feedback. And so I feel like they basically cited inflation, like, and rising costs of production, basically for the reason for this price increase. And then obviously like tried to divert by saying, oh, by the way, these other things didn't increase. But really at the end of the day, I kind of feel like it's probably partly a labor cost increase, especially because the dolls that got the price increase were ones that have more complex outfits. They're just dolls that require a lot more like human hours on these dolls to get them made. When you have multiple pieces for their outfits and even like higher quality fabrics, I just feel like the historical dolls take a lot more time to make than, say, for instance, like a Truly Me doll. The other thing that I think is a little bit weird is that we just got like a brand new store in Dallas and they didn't spare any expenses. That wasn't just like a little boutique. I mean, that thing was a custom build out. And so I do, I understand that these things are important for, bringing hype to the brand. And I'm sure they did the numbers and knew that that store would be profitable. But we're talking like that Dallas store would have cost them millions and millions of dollars to put together and open and maintain. So that is a huge, huge cost for American Girl. And I feel like they're basically closing all the stores except for, what are we saying now? We think the flagship store in Chicago, LA, New York, and Dallas. I think that's probably going to be, unless I'm forgetting one, those are going to be the only 4 American Girl retail stores we have. So I think in their mind, they're thinking, okay, we'll shut everything down and put all the costs from those into the main cities where we're seeing like our biggest profits, and then rely on online sales for the rest of the country. It's an interesting choice. I feel like at the end of the day, if you live in New York, LA, or Dallas, you're probably thrilled to have access to an American Girl store. But for everybody that lives everywhere else, we're kind of thinking like, can't y'all just have like the one store in Chicago and then, close all these stores and, get the prices down? Again, I don't even know if it would work in American Girl's favor to do that. It's just interesting. I don't know their finances. I don't know how much debt, if any, that Mattel or American Girl have. But yeah, opening that Dallas store would not have been cheap. So, part of me wonders if like that has something to do with like decreased profits over these last couple of quarters. I don't know. So yeah, there are a few things going on with American Girl that we could maybe like point to say, yeah, this is probably why this is happening. But, really at the end of the day, I think it's just the cost to make the products is going up, and Mattel is doing, or American Girl at least, is doing their absolute best to try and keep prices down. I'm just trying to remember that, based on the trajectory of inflation for most things like housing and groceries and stuff, these dolls should cost closer to $200 now, and they don't really cost anywhere near that. So I'm trying to be grateful that they are still cheaper than they probably should be. So that is something, I guess, to remember when we see these increases, that I don't think that it is just pure corporate greed. I think at worst, it's maybe some poor decisions made on behalf of appeasing shareholders potentially. But all in all, like for me, whatever it takes to keep American Girl thriving and continuing on for another 10, 20, 30, I want this company to stand the test of time. And to do that, you have to raise prices on things, because that's unfortunately just the way the world works. And it's important for them to do that. I want American Girl to be successful because it brings me and millions of other people so much joy to their life. I would be so sad without them. So I trust that they know what they're doing, so that's why I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, this is so horrible. I can't believe they've done this to us. What were they thinking? This is such a horrible company. I just think that they're doing what they have to do. I believe in my heart of hearts that the people that work at American Girl love the company. That's something, I just think that most people that work there have a history with the brand, and they really, really love it, and they care about it, and they want to see it thrive and succeed. And again, even if they don't like dolls, they still want to see the brand succeed because they need to keep a roof over their head and feed their families. So, I think that they are caring for the brand, and sometimes you just have to take your lumps when it comes to inflation. And I think that's what we're doing right now, is just, we have to deal with yet another price increase on a thing that, most of us see as essential to our lives. At this point, American Girl is essential to my life. I see it like basically it's like housing, groceries, American Girl. So, I'm going to keep buying the dolls. I think some people are saying like, oh, I'm going to boycott. I'm not going to buy the doll that I was going to buy, but it's really not going to do anything at the end of the day. This is where we're at as a society. So, not buying the doll, I understand if it's an issue of budgeting, but just to not buy it because you're mad that the price increases, that's your choice to make. I personally am probably not going to change my spending habits, but but if you do, I totally get it. We vote with our dollars. So, if you decide that you don't want to purchase a doll as a way of sending a message to the company that you're upset about the price increase, that you are within your right to do that. So it's totally up to you. But I really do want to know what you think in the comments. I want to know what you think of all of this. If you think that they are right in raising their prices, if you think that they've done a good job over the years and done this really conservatively, or are you just super mad that the prices are higher just like everything else, and you feel like maybe the quality on these things isn't what it was when you were a child? Let me know in the comments. I'm really, really curious what you think. Me personally, I would be so happy for these price increases if we could see quality increases. But, for now, I'm not going to hold my breath. Don't forget to check me out on Patreon, where there are hours and hours of more content like this. This is basically how I run my Patreon channel. I sit down with the microphone, we gab about dolls, and then I open my mail for the week. So if you would like to join me there, that is a super duper great way to help support this channel so I can keep making videos. Right now, the lowest tier is only $3 a month, and you get a ton of extra perks. So I would love to see you there. Another way to support this channel is shopping at my shop at idreamofjohnny.com, where there's tons of awesome merch and some vintage American Girl items. And we're going to have a really, really big shop update later this summer, hopefully, that I'm really excited about. So be sure to check it out. You can find me at other places on the internet, such as TikTok and Instagram at idreamofjohnny. And if you want to keep hanging out on YouTube, you can catch me in this video right here. And I would love to see you there. Until I see you again, please take care of yourself and each other, and we'll chat soon. Bye.